Hey, what's up everybody? cmdrradix here bringing you another video. And today, we're going to try yet another new format for doing history videos. I say new format as if we've had an old format. You guys know that I have basically been throwing things against a wall and seeing if it would stick for about 10 years now, so I don't know what I'm doing. But several years ago, I don't even want to look up how long ago it was because I am scared. We started a series here on this channel called cmdrradix's American History, where I, cmdrradix, talked to you about American history. It lasted for a few years. We didn't get past the English Civil War. But I have expressed time and time again that I am not as happy with that series as I could be, that I've sort of wanted to redo parts of that series. And today, ladies and gentlemen, that's kind of what I'm going to do here today. I'm going to be trying to do a history video that's a little bit more self-contained in some ways, and also, hopefully, doesn't fall into the endless trap of project scope and in creep, where things get more difficult over time and to the point where I get overwhelmed and I just give up on a project. We're going to go bit by bit through American history, starting with Roanoke. So this video is sort of the first part of what I intend, if we ever make another video, to be a sort of redo of my old cmdrradix's American History Episode 1, The Lost Colony. It's a bit of a revised version of that. Now, I am of the mind that the term American, and we need to get that word out of the way when we talk about American history, refers to the United States of America, and that the Union emerged as a union between foundational American ethnicities that emerged as offshoots of the English nation. While the United States as a polity is a multicultural realm, like a lot of states out there remain these core English offshoot nations to its history. As the world's sole superpower, the United States plays a key role in the modern day. Understanding these core nations of the United States, therefore, is key to understanding the modern world. This is not to minimize or marginalize the other people and nations who have played a large role in the history of the United States, namely the American Indians who were present on the continent before the arrival of the English, nor the Spanish who explored the region before the arrival of the English, nor later waves of aliens. But to understand the history of the American nations, one must start with the earliest actors from whose agency, labor, and legacy they sprouted from, that being the first colonies from England, who claimed and created the land they knew as Virginia. As such, my history of America doesn't start with a lot of common dating points you see when other historians try to start a history of America. I don't start at 66 million years ago when the continent of North America formed. I don't start with the crossing of the ancestors of the American Indians from Asia into North America over 13,000 years ago. I also don't start with the first known European contact with the Americas by the Norsemen in the 980s. I also don't really start my history of America with the establishment of long-term contact between Europe and the Americas by Christopher Columbus in 1492. Nor do I really start my history of America with the first long-term English settlement in the New World at St. John's near Newfoundland in around 1500. Rather, I believe that the best place to start is with the beginning of the English settlement of the land of Virginia. And that's a running theme of my American history philosophy, my American history perspective, and that is America starts with the English settlers, the English who came to America and provided the seeds for the growth of the American nation. And what I want to look at today, ladies and gentlemen, is see how did the English get interested in the Americas? Why did they decide to establish a colony in the Americas? And importantly, what was the context behind the English who decided to create the first attempt at a colony in the Americas? And we see very clearly that there is a clear line of cause and effect from the English Reformation to the establishment of the first English attempt of a colony in the New World, Roanoke. In 1492, Italian explorer Christopher Columbus, on the behalf of Spain, made contact with the New World. This was a re-establishment of transatlantic contact between Europe and the New World since the Norse exploration and settlement of northeastern North America in the 11th century. Following this discovery, European nations entered a race to colonize the newly discovered Americas, in which Spain and Portugal would take the lead. Even France was able to establish settlements in the New World. As a result of their conquests, these Europeans reaped great economic rewards, most especially in vast quantities of gold. By the late 16th century, however, England still did not have a single permanent colony on either of the two American continents, despite regular visits to North America by English fishermen since the start of the century. It appeared as if England was to fall behind her rivals. But England wasn't really able to focus on something like the colonization of the Americas because they had their own domestic instabilities to deal with. Starting in 1517, the Protestant Reformation swept over Europe and began a period of strife and sectional fighting between the various Protestant Christian sects and the Roman Catholic Church. During this time, King Henry VIII would assert royal supremacy against the jurisdiction of the Pope of Rome over the Church of England. The English Reformation was a bumpy process which faced an existential threat with the ascension of the ardent Roman Catholic Queen Mary I of England in 1553. Queen Mary sought to squash the English Reformation in its infancy, though this Reformation had already gained a strong foothold among the English people. Queen Mary enacted staunch anti-Protestant policies that earned her the moniker of Bloody Mary for the blood of Protestant martyrs killed in England under her reign, particularly in Greater East Anglia. This furthered tensions between the monarchy and the people. And this Greater East Anglia region is an important region to keep your eye on during this transition from English history into American history, because it's this Greater East Anglia area which has this huge amount of Protestant martyrs, where we will see sort of the rise of the more radical Reformation, we will see the rise of the Puritans, and we will see the main seed that led to the ethnic group that would become the Yankees, or the Northern States Americans. The Marian persecutions came for many Protestants, and would give rise to a caste of English Protestant heroes who would harden their hearts against Roman Catholicism due to the persecution they experienced at a young age. The Protestant family of a boy named Walter Raleigh, for example, would have a number of near-death escapes during the reign of Queen Mary. This would shape Walter Raleigh's views on Roman Catholicism, along with his half-brother Humphrey Gilbert and his cousin Richard Grenville. The family of the Protestant Francis Drake would also face persecution in the Marian period. The English Protestants were able to breathe a sigh of relief in 1558 when Queen Mary I died, and was succeeded by her Anglican Protestant half-sister, Queen Elizabeth I, under whom the English Reformation truly began to take hold. It was under her reign that the Elizabethan settlement was passed in 1559, establishing the Protestant character of the Anglican Church of England, issuing the 1559 Book of Common Prayer, and eventually finalizing the 39 articles which defined Anglicanism in 1571. This renewed Protestant spirit invigorated England's young men, especially those Protestants who faced persecution under Queen Mary. Walter Raleigh, for example, sought out revenge against the Roman Catholics and became involved in the French Wars of Religion in France, supporting the Protestant Huguenots against the French monarchy. When the Catholic Spanish and Italians began to support the anti-English revolts by Roman Catholic Irish in English-dominated Ireland, Raleigh would be involved and beheaded over 600 Spanish and Italian Catholic soldiers. Raleigh's cousin Richard Grenville and his half-brother Humphrey Gilbert would engage in similar affairs. Their families became Protestant and English heroes who proved their loyalties to the Anglican cause. As such, the family would be knighted. This close-knit group of Protestant West Country aristocratic adventurers would be a key group who drove the English colonization of America. Francis Drake was another such story. Drake had experience in naval exploration as he had been exploring the ocean since he was in his 20s, sailing with his second cousin to Africa, stealing slaves from the Portuguese and destroying their ships, then selling the slaves to the Spanish. His actions would technically mark the first participation of the English in the transatlantic slave trade, but he didn't make slave trading his career or anything. He worked alongside a group of African slaves from the French and had helped them destroy French outposts in Africa. In 1577, Drake set out on a circumnavigation of the globe, going around South America and landing in California in 1579 to establish an English colony, naming the area New Albion and claiming it for England. While the English did not settle New Albion, the territorial claim would provide legal justification for England to claim rights to American territories from the Atlantic to the Pacific once colonies were established in eastern North America. Upon completing his circumnavigation of the globe in 1580, Drake was knighted by Queen Elizabeth herself. The English Reformation had created monarchical instability since the early death of King Henry VIII. This would carry over into English relations with neighboring Roman Catholic Ireland. The Irish were seen as a threat to the Protestant supremacy over England, and they would become pawns in the struggle between Anglican England and Catholic Spain. Queen Elizabeth I intensified efforts to conquer Ireland, seeking to stabilize the situation in the British Isles. Many of those Elizabeth sent to Ireland in the 1560s and 1570s would be the same men to put effort into the creation of a colony in America. Because of their loyalty and zealotry, Queen Elizabeth put Sir Raleigh, Sir Gilbert, and Sir Grenville in charge of overseeing the English conquest of Ireland. The Protestant aristocrats saw Ireland as being an uncivilized land, filled with tyranny, and the Irish were seen as being disloyal to their obligations to the English crown. Therefore, this was used to justify the methods of the English conquest, including the implementation of more brutal methods. Sir Gilbert, for example, engaged in mass decapitation of the Irish, bringing great terror in Ireland. Irish heads should there be laid on the ground by each side of the way leading into his own tent, so that none could come into his tent for any cause, but commonly he must pass through a lane of heads. In their free time, Sir Raleigh and Sir Gilbert took a personal interest in reports of the Spanish exploration and colonization of the New World. Sir Gilbert especially took inspiration from reports of the Spanish treatment of certain Amerindian nations and applied the lessons the Spanish learned in America to his efforts at pacifying Ireland. Raleigh was one of the few men of his time who believed that the northern part of North America was worth settling. Sir Gilbert learned through French reports that the New World was a land where great wealth was to be found, and Sir Raleigh recognized that the value of the Americas was not simply in gold, but in raw materials and resources as well. It was also around this time that the Anglican priest Richard Hakluyt devoted his life to collecting and publishing accounts of the voyage of English seamen, dramatizing the New World for the interests of the Englishmen, and romanticizing locations such as the island of St. John's near Newfoundland, which had been used by English fishermen since about 1500 as a base for fishing around North America alongside other European fishermen. Sir Raleigh recognized that the Irish situation absorbed resources that could be used for the Americas. He proposed to increase English wealth and resources by planting an English nation, that was his words, in North America. He also thought the Americas could be an outlet for the criminals that had swarmed England's streets in recent years, and also provide a market for the goods that England's growing and early manufacturing industry wanted to make. Raleigh also believed that the establishment of English colonies in America would put pressure on Spain. Sir Raleigh and Gilbert would discuss the possibility of an American colonization venture with potential English backers and Queen Elizabeth I, emphasizing the potential value of colonizing America. Because of their successes in Ireland, which would be similar to the job of colonizing America, and their great interest, Elizabeth gave Gilbert a 6-year patent to colonize any part of the globe not held by a Christian monarch in 1578. While Elizabeth had some interest in colonization, Elizabeth and the English monetary backers were concerned about the Spanish Empire, as the English rival remained the dominant power in the Americas. Sir Gilbert and Elizabeth saw St. John's, near Newfoundland, to be a possible colonization opportunity. While St. John's already had a constant English presence, nobody truly lived at St. John's, as it was not a permanent settlement. It had much potential as the first formal English colony in the New World. In 1583, after several setbacks, Sir Gilbert organized an expedition to St. John to claim the outpost and establish the springboard for an overseas English empire, with investments from Sir Walter Raleigh. Sir Gilbert set out on his personal ship, the Squirrel, which he loaded up with so much cannon that the ship was no longer structurally sound. He also traveled with the Golden Hind. Neither of these small ships were properly outfitted for a transatlantic crossing. Sir Gilbert arrived at the port of St. John's and claimed the island for England. He was welcomed with a reception in which the abiding English fishermen gifted a dog to Sir Gilbert. Sir Gilbert then needed to sail back to England in September to obtain supplies to establish a permanent settlement in Newfoundland. During the voyage, the Squirrel continued to fall apart. Sir Gilbert even stepped on a nail that had been broken loose from the creaking ship. The crew worked hard to convince Sir Gilbert to stay on the Golden Hind, as they believed that the Squirrel would not make the crossing. Gilbert refused to be separated from his ship and locked himself up in his quarters to read. On September 9th, as the ships approached Portugal, they entered a terrible storm. Gilbert was on board the Squirrel reading a book. Gilbert is said to have looked up at the storm and then to the Golden Hind and pointed up to the sky, declaring, "We are as near to heaven by sea as by land." The Squirrel sank in the storm, and Sir Humphrey Gilbert died in the Atlantic Ocean, like many other ships in this age of sail. The Golden Hind managed to make its way back to England, where they reported the situation to Elizabeth and Sir Raleigh. The first English effort to formally establish a colony in America had failed, and Sir Gilbert had died. Raleigh needed a new plan. Because of his investments in Sir Gilbert's expedition, Sir Walter Raleigh secured his own 6-year grant from Queen Elizabeth in 1584, which permitted him to establish a dominion anywhere on the American coast. He was granted leave, quote, "to discover, search, find out, and view such remote, heathen, and barbarous lands, countries, and territories not actually possessed of any Christian prince, nor inhabited by Christian people, and to establish a colony." Sir Raleigh solemnly took up this task, as Queen Elizabeth informed him that, should he fail to establish a colony, he would lose the right to ever establish a colony again. Raleigh kicked himself into high gear and, in a last-ditch effort, dispatched navigators Arthur Barlow and Philip Amadas with a small group of men under orders to find something. But this is going to conclude our first look at the history of America as we are going towards the colonization of Roanoke. We can kind of see how the English Reformation sort of led to a time of strife and struggle in England, especially with conflict between the Catholics and the Protestants. And out of this conflict emerged a sort of West Country Protestant aristocratic adventurer class in the forms of Sir Walter Raleigh, Sir Francis Drake, Sir Humphrey Gilbert, and Sir Richard Grenville. And these are the men that are going to be really important in this English colonial effort, this effort to establish a colony in America, a colony that will eventually be named Virginia. But this concludes our little discussion on how the English Reformation sort of led to this colonial effort. Please let me know what you think in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching to the end of this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Subscribe to this channel if you have not yet. Follow me on social media. All the links are in the description. And have a great day, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, got me in this party all up in the zone. Hottest Betty's trying to take